Alright everyone, it's time for the Occult video 214, the all-encompassing ego, specifically with relation to ascetic paths, like Buddhism and stuff like that. That's basically the crux of this video. If you know anything about certain Eastern traditions, and some that aren't Eastern, like the dervishes or something, some of their sub-schools of thought, there's a focus on sort of liberating oneself from being or trying to destroy the ego in some way, like suppression or destruction. Either physically or spiritually, of basically the very idea in some form of self. What I would say to these people, like, let's say you're a Buddhist, a Zen Buddhist. Your whole goal is to be liberated from the reincarnation cycle, become basically a non-entity, just part of the universal half is, half isn't sort of non-dichotomous, amorphous whole of existence. Let's say that that's your goal. They would say suppression of ego is very, very important for such a thing. What I would say is it's very egotistical to seek such a thing. The only reason you're seeking it is to liberate yourself as an individual entity, to destroy yourself. It's almost a form of astral suicide when you really think of it in its purest form. It's unlike some other traditions. Actually, when I was editing the work on the dervishes, that I released, by the way, available on my books blogs. There are links in the description. I can't remember which category I put it under. I think it was under the spirituality header, but it could have been academics. When the dervishes emerged, the sort of mystic school within Islam, a lot of them were ascetic. That is, they would forego things like they'd be chaste. They'd say, okay, I'm going to take a vow. I'm not going to have sex or get married. I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to eat certain foods. I'm going to eat very little food in total. I'm going to be a beggar, basically own nothing but, clothes to cover my nudity. I will live day to day on alms only. That's all I'll have my piece of bread and a cup of warm water that a dog pissed in, and I'll be happy because I'm becoming one with God. They then formed a second group of movements within the dervish movement that sprang up from the same basic understanding of that sort of divine totality of non-dual deity, sort of vaguely Gnostic in extraction, that were hedonists. And they're like, well, it doesn't really matter now, does it? I'm part of this oneness. It doesn't matter if it takes, in their case, they don't believe in, like, reincarnation, strictly speaking, but they're like, I don't even care if I'm in hell because I'm one with God. I can do whatever I want. I'm going to drink. I'm going to have orgies. I'm going to do drugs. I'll cut myself if I want. I'll cut other people. I'll fucking chop somebody's head off, and it won't matter. I don't care if I get judged for my action. I can roll around in my own turds if it really makes me happy, and I go to hell, but I'm still with God. Eventually, even the fires of hell will become passé. I'll stop caring. I'll just be wandering around with my dick out, basically, peeing on Satan, and be totally, fundamentally, completely liberated. And in the long span of the aeons, even hell shall pass away or something. And it's very interesting. And that's actually, I think, arguably, basically a description of this sort of divine ego, this all-encompassing ego. You've got these two groups that have these various different practices. One group is very ascetic. They're like, we forgo a bunch of things, crucify the flesh. Christians do this, Buddhists. They all have this idea of sacrifice, this idea of giving things up. Then you have their counterparts, which are usually smaller, that are more left-hand, and they're like, no, you should indulge, do whatever you want. And then you have various shades of gray or different ideas. Like, I'm an Epicurean. I believe pleasure and egotism is wonderful. It's the highest good. But it shouldn't destroy others' ability to engage in the same. I'm no solipsist. That's number one. That's just my own philosophical opinion. It's not part of any school. It's just what I've arrived at. And number two, simple pleasures are better because they can be maintained even under stress. Like if there was a nuclear war tomorrow and your pleasure is playing video games and driving fast cars, you're butt-fuck out of luck. But if your pleasure is, hey, I like sunshine on my shoulders, I like to go and plant things and read a book, you can do that after the apocalypse. You can do that. You can do that if there's no clothing, there's no electricity, there's fucking nothing. Yeah, you're going to have to sow crops. It's a good thing that you enjoy it. And so being an Epicurean, I feel, at least within my own anecdotal experience, is superior to being like a blind materialist on one hand or ascetic. I don't want to forgo things. No, sex is great. Food is great. Wine, women, and song. All that stuff is wonderful in its proper place. It destroys people if it's excessive. Become a total libertine like Marquis de Sade or something like that. End up thrown in a jail cell usually. That's what I'd say. But I would say that people who are ascetic, they claim that they want to destroy their ego or deaden it, suppress themselves. they're only doing it for egotistical purposes. The very express purpose is to liberate oneself from suffering. They simply see the suffering as the existence of that self and ego in totality to begin with. So, but it's still, literally destroying the ego is egotism. It's just like the liberation from suffering that someone who's suicidal wants requires that the suffering itself. If the Christians are right, then they I don't know, they go to the suicide circle of hell and get wrapped up in a tree that gets cut by animals and bleeds all the time and moans and shit so they can talk. Or some weird shit like that from Dante. It's very morbid. I would say the egotism is wonderful. It's also inevitable. It doesn't matter the Dalai Lama is egotistical. Otherwise he wouldn't be weighing in on socio-political events. He wouldn't care. He'd say, well, the world can fuck itself for all I care. I'm liberated. You should be liberated too. Just meditate. Don't worry about, I'm a Marxist or borders. He wouldn't even weigh in on him. There's no reason to. Other than to get more converts to give the fucker money, which is basically, the Pope does this too. Give a vow of poverty, but I'm going to sit here on my fucking throne and drink my $100 bottle of wine. By the way, I'm very, very pious. I don't carry the golden cross around all the time, so somehow this makes me like the same as a homeless hermit. No, it doesn't. Fuck the Pope. That's what I would say. Or some of these Islamic mystics. And just some dervishes too. Hindu mystics and stuff. Like, I take a vow of poverty, but then they're boffing people in their temple and boffing the altar girl. It happens all of the time. The ego is not capable of being destroyed. Why would you want to destroy it? Materialism isn't suffering unless it becomes... If you're the master over the material, it's not suffering, it's the highest good, it's the highest... it's wonderful. It's the highest sensual sort of pleasure you can get. If you believe in reincarnation after a sort, as I do, then, I mean, the physical body decays, it gets old and dies. Who fucking cares? Then you get to experience another life. You're not going to remember the suffering. So you suffer each time you go through a life. So you also get to enjoy things. You go along for the ride. Why would you want to crucify your ego and become part of some whole you can't even really more than half experience? That sounds like hell to me. The Buddhist idea of liberation to me sounds like hell. It sounds worse than hell. At least in hell you're an individual. Oh, I'm roasting in fire. Eventually I'm not going to really care anymore. It's just going to become the new norm. I'll just, beat off into the flames for Moloch, and I'll go and beat on demons, and they'll throw me against the wall, break all my bones, and then they'll slowly, painfully regrow, and then I'll do it again. It'll be fun for the rest of eternity. And there's shrieking and pain and long, grotesque shadows cast. Who cares? You're still a person. That's about all. Peace out.